Caleb, welcome to the show. It must be even more difficult in the United States in these heightened days of war fervor than it is here in Britain. But I've got to tell you, I think the Ukraine mania has begun to wear a bit thin on this side of the ocean. How goes it over on your side?
Oh, we're observing exactly the same thing. Just right now as we speak, we have an outreach team at the White House in Washington, D.C., handing out leaflets. Russia is not our enemy. Wall Street is. We've been doing that in New York City and around the country, and we are getting a very positive reaction from people. At the beginning, sure, there was this surge of emotions from mainstream media, but that's starting to break. People are really sick of it on some level. And a lot of people are watching American news and saying, this looks an awful lot like propaganda. Every Russian is portrayed as a vicious, evil murderer. Every Ukrainian, even though some of them are Nazis and they have an official Nazi division, every Ukrainian is portrayed as a heroic fighter. American news is so obviously war propaganda at this point. A lot of people are sick of it and aren't buying it and are open to hearing another side. And that's why we've seen the big crackdown on voices like RT, on YouTube channels and others who are daring to show the other side, because people are hungry for it. People are very, very hungry for it.
Yeah, I was going to turn to that latter issue, and I will, but let me look at, if you like, the corollary of that. The media, which has not been cracked down upon, is cracking up under the pressure of mass boycott. CNN Plus is to close when its audience reached 10,000 in the whole world. 10,000. And it's now closed down. The corollary is also true, isn't it? That it's not just that news that people might find more trustworthy cannot be found, but the official news nobody wants to watch.
Sure. I mean, Netflix is also losing subscribers. Elon Musk has become kind of a hero on social media because he's beating the drum about how obnoxious the pounding of woke ideology into the heads of the masses, whether it's from CNN, whether it's from Netflix, whether it's from the social media giants, is becoming. Average Americans are sick of this, and they're looking at the fact that the gas prices are rising. They're looking at the cost of food, and they're getting sick and tired of it. At the end of the day, there's a lot of working class young people in the United States who bought into it. And during the pandemic, they went out and they protested and they rioted and they raged against racism and stood up against the police state. But now they're looking at their lives and saying, okay, a lot of windows were broken. Okay, a lot of anger has been made. A lot of social media posts have gone viral. But have our lives gotten any better? Have things really improved for American working families? And a lot of working people in the United States, a lot of working class youth are saying, no, they haven't really gotten better. And when it really gets down to it, wokeism is a false messiah. It's coming in and promising to rejuvenate the country, to offer redemption. If you just say all the right buzzwords and all the key phrases, the curse hanging over U.S. society from its foundations of slavery and genocide of the Native Americans will somehow be lifted. But it's a false messiah, they're realizing, because at the end of the day, the problem is economic. The problem is the economic foundations, capitalism, and a system of production organized for profit. And you're not going to get rid of that with buzzwords. And you're not going to get rid of that with workshops, where people talk about their emotions and feelings. You're going to have to address the economic foundations of the problem. And when it gets down to it, our leaders here in the United States do not care about the working class. They don't care about working families. Their only concern is enriching the profits of huge multinational corporations. And they are waging economic warfare around the world in the form of sanctions. They've escalated this Ukraine crisis, taking us to the brink of World War III. They don't care about the consequences for working people here or around the world. And the problems are in the economic foundations, not the buzzwords, not the phrases, not going back and adjusting Disney movies to make them politically correct. That's not going to solve the fundamental problem.
We truly are two hearts that beat as one, Caleb, and I thank you for that soliloquy, which could as powerfully have been made here in Britain and maybe in other European countries also. And particularly for what you said on that wave of outrage, that upsurge that took place over the last year or so in the United States. It went up like a rocket, but it came down just a burnt stick, didn't it? A lot of property trashed, but nothing changed at the end of it, because that doesn't bring change. Minding your pronouns doesn't bring political and economic change. And until people see that and unite with people who are maybe clumsy with their pronouns, or maybe clumsy with their attitude to the various sexual orientations that I increasingly discover exist, at least on rainbow flags and on Twitter and so on. There's ways of doing things I never knew existed. And fair play, let 1,000 flowers bloom. We want to interfere in no one's personal life. But until we can unite everybody against the one thing that oppresses everybody, we're not going to make any progress, are we?
Absolutely not. And the scary thing is that at this point, there is a pending global food crisis. You know, Ukraine is a wheat-producing country, and because of the conflict that the United States has provoked there and is now escalating, pouring more weapons in, their wheat output, according to a lot of sources in Russia, their wheat output is going to be roughly 50% of what it usually is. And if you add to that the fact that Russian fertilizer has been held off because of the sanctions from the United States, if you add to that the fact that we're at this point in the United States anticipating a lot of droughts and wildfires all throughout farming states in the Midwest of the United States, there's going to be a global food crisis. There's going to be food shortages. And this is an emergency. And our leaders should be convening an international meeting about how to resolve this food crisis. There's already been malnutrition-related deaths rising on the African continent due to the pandemic. But what's coming up is going to be a meltdown of the global food apparatus, food production, and our leaders don't seem concerned about it. It's shocking to me to watch, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and your leaders in Britain and, the leaders of NATO. They realize that their actions escalating with Russia are going to cause people to go hungry, not just around the world, but in the Western countries themselves. And they don't seem at all concerned about this. The USA has been waging economic warfare against Venezuela. They grabbed Alex Saab off of his airplane because he was trying to arrange, allegedly, for Iran to export food to Venezuela. The USA has been trying to starve the people of Venezuela, with sanctions. You look at what Joe Biden did in Afghanistan, where after the USA devastated the country with 20 years of occupation, then the USA pulled out and then froze all their funds and their money in the middle of an economic crisis. And Afghans were left to go hungry. Their money was taken from them. Joe Biden is very much the starvation president. That's what he's going to be remembered as. He is the president who presided over hunger. You remember when he was in the Obama administration, he and Obama became the first presidents in U.S. history to cut the amount of food assistance that goes to low-income families. No president before had ever reduced the amount of food assistance low-income families got through the food stamps program, the supplemental nutrition assistance program. But that was what Biden was when he was vice president. And now he's presiding over policies that are going to cause people to starve. It's shocking to me what's on the horizon due to their economic warfare, and they're not concerned about it.
Well, of course, everything in the economy is rationed. It's often a word that's used to frighten the horses. But normally in capitalist society, things are rationed by price. You can get food, but only if you can pay the ever-escalating price of it. What are we demanding here? It seems to me that we'll soon be in a position where we'll have to demand that the poor and the low-paid and even the lower part of the middle class are able to get their fair share of a declining amount of food. Seems incredible that we're having this conversation in 2022, But you're absolutely right. Russia's the biggest wheat producer and Ukraine is the second biggest. If Ukraine's harvest falls by half and we're not allowed to buy Russian wheat, ipso facto, you've got a food crisis.
Indeed. And our leaders seem to be fine with that. As long as it helps them wage their campaign to beat down Russia, to beat down China, to beat down Iran or Venezuela or Cuba or any independent country. I mean, the world is really led by a group of insane Malthusians. I mean, you read these documents where they're talking about overpopulation. There's just too many people in the world. They say we've got to reduce the population, reduce consumption, drive down living standards. There is a very maniacally evil group of people that sit at the top of the global capitalist system that have a very sinister agenda. And they don't seem to care about the consequences for average working people. They're thinking like monopolists. You know, when there's a storm, the big fish survive and the little fish go under and die. You know, you can talk about how Walmart, you know, we all know about Walmart in the United States. When they come to a town, they lower their prices and put their competitors out of business. And then the people who work at those smaller businesses lose their jobs. And then once they've gained control of the market, the prices rise up once again. And this pandemic has created an opportunity for the sinister monopolists that dominate global capitalism, the big oil bankers, you know, the folks on Silicon Valley, you know, Bill Gates and others, the Rockefellers. They sit at the center of a global financial system that is essentially trying to set the world on fire in order to secure their position. And it's utterly terrifying. And the interest of working people all over the world, as well as the interest of small business owners, as well as the interest of entire nations around the world, is against them. You know, and what they are doing, I mean, they're taking humanity on a suicide mission, essentially, in order to secure their position at the top of the hill. And there is a rising resistance to it in the West. There's a rising resistance to it around the world. And, you know, I mean, you talk about Imran Khan. I mean, he was targeted because he's somebody who has stood up for the people of Pakistan. He stood up for them, right? You know, and you talk about the Belt and Road Initiative and the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. There is a rising movement of resistance around the world trying to raise living standards, raise people out of poverty, have sustainable economic development, get beyond fossil fuels to a higher mode of energy, like fusion energy, right? Not reduce living standards to deal with climate change, but unleash human creativity and change our relationship with the environment. That alternative is what they're trying to suppress.
And yet, all of this is being presided over, at least in the Anglo-sphere, by two of the least convincing political leaders that anyone could ever have seen on the political stage. Boris Johnson bumbling from crisis to crisis, maybe even to oblivion in a few weeks' time when the local elections here take place, maybe overthrown in an internal Conservative Party coup. And in the United States, well, not to put too fine a point on it, I would not send your president out to buy a loaf, at least not expecting him to come back with the right bread or the right change. And yet these two powers, the United States and the United Kingdom, are behaving as if they were themselves politically and economically stable. How do you account for that?
At the end of the day, the emperor has no clothes, and the whole world knows it. And the crackdown that we're seeing and the silencing of dissident voices, anyone who dares not go along with this, that's rooted in their desperation. Because at the end of the day, they know that they, on some level, don't know what they're doing. On some level, the world is not going to go along with their agenda. When I see how they're just coming for everybody, anyone who dares question this is being targeted. Alice Walker, the novelist who wrote The Color Purple, is, you know, just a definitive African-American woman in American literature, has been banned from the Bay Area book fair. They're arguing that she must be anti-Semitic because she stands with the Palestinian people. And they have banned her from from the Bay Area Book Fair. They're trying to silence one of the greatest voices in American literature right now. They are desperate to just silence and shut down any voice that points out what is actually going on, because at this point, people don't like the pending meltdown that they're planning. I mean, people are tired of these lockdowns. People are tired of the devastating economic impact that all of this has had. And they want justice, and they want to know that their kids are going to have food to eat, and that there's going to be, there's going to be roads in their neighborhood that aren't crumbling and falling apart. I mean, things that are just pretty basic are in the process of being denied to people in the United States. And pretty soon, something like the yellow vests in France is going to come to the United States. We don't know when, but it's only a matter of time. We saw the trucker convoy in Canada. We've seen Occupy Wall Street. We've seen Black Lives Matter. We've seen the Tea Party. There's going to be some kind of working class rebellion against these conditions being unleashed by our leaders right now. And when that comes, it's going to shake the country. And they know it's only a matter of time before it happens. They're trying to preempt it. They're trying to label it fascist, label it Nazi before it ever happens, because they know the working people are not going to take it anymore. And there is going to be a resistance from different sectors of U.S. society. The African-American community, they're going to make their voice heard. Low-income folks in rural states and Appalachia, they're going to make their voices heard. The people in the suburban neighborhoods that used to be prosperous throughout the United States and are now crumbling with empty, foreclosed homes, they're going to make their voices heard. The farmers are going to make their voices heard. The working people, the young people that are stuck in a cycle of low-wage, short-term service sector jobs. There's going to be an explosion coming, and they know it. They know this explosion is coming, and they're trying to preempt it with this woke cancel culture where every voice that dares speak up and say what's actually going on gets shut down and silenced.
Caleb Maupin, a privilege, as always, to talk with you. Thanks for coming.